The day my mother died felt like the ground beneath my life finally gave way. She had been my last constant, the one person who believed in me even when I struggled to believe in myself. The house felt unbearably silent after the funeral, every corner echoing with memories of her voice, her advice, her quiet strength. Grief settled into my chest like a heavy stone, making even the simplest tasks feel impossible. I wasn't just mourning her death. I was mourning the loss of safety, of unconditional love, of the one person who never judged my failures. As I tried to process that loss, my marriage began to crack under the weight of it. I wasn't the same man anymore. I was distracted, exhausted, emotionally hollow. Nights passed where sleep wouldn't come, and mornings arrived with a dull ache that never fully faded. Instead of comfort, I was met with impatience. Instead of understanding, there was distance. Conversations with my wife turned cold and transactional. As if my pain was an inconvenience she no longer wanted to deal with. Then came the words I never expected to hear so soon after burying my mother. She said she wanted a divorce. She said she couldn't be with someone who was going nowhere, someone drowning in sadness and uncertainty. There was no anger in her voice, just detachment, which hurt even more. In that moment, I realized she wasn't leaving because she didn't love me anymore. She was leaving because she believed I had nothing left to offer. The timing made the betrayal cut deeper. I was already broken, already at my lowest, and now the person who promised to stand by me chose to walk away. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I simply listened numb as she explained how she wanted a better life, more stability, more excitement. To her, I represented loss, stagnation, and emotional weight she no longer wanted to carry. When she packed her bags and closed the door behind her, the silence returned heavier than before. I sat alone in that empty house, surrounded by grief and rejection, questioning my worth as a son, a husband, a man. It felt like life had stripped everything from me in one brutal sequence. First my mother, then my marriage, then my sense of identity. At that point, there was no hope, no vision of a brighter future, just pain, confusion, and the crushing belief that I had been abandoned when I needed love the most. To anyone looking from the outside, I was a man who had lost everything: family, partnership, direction. And maybe that's why what came next would matter so much. Because before the rise, before the transformation, there had to be absolute ruin. What hurt more than the divorce itself was the realization of when and why she chose to leave. It wasn't during an argument or a moment of explosive conflict. It was during my silence, my grief, my weakest season. I wasn't failing as a husband because I had done something wrong. I was failing because I was hurting. And that was the moment she decided I was no longer worth staying with. In the weeks after my mother's death, I didn't ask for much. I didn't need solutions or lectures about being strong. I needed patience, warmth, someone to sit beside me when the nights felt endless. Instead, I felt judged for my sadness, measured against an invisible standard of how quickly I should move on. Every sigh, every distant look told me the same thing: my pain had become a burden. She began to compare me to other men, men who were thriving, ambitious, emotionally untouched by loss. She spoke about the future as if I no longer belonged in it. Her words were subtle, but their meaning was sharp. She wanted momentum, status, and certainty. I was offering grief, uncertainty, and emotional honesty. In her eyes, that made me weak. When she finally asked for the divorce, she framed it as a practical decision. She said she needed to think about herself. She said she couldn't sacrifice her happiness waiting for me to recover. There was no acknowledgement of the vows we had made, no respect for the fact that marriage was supposed to be tested in moments exactly like this. Love, it seemed, had conditions I hadn't known about. I replayed our last conversations over and over, wondering if I had missed some warning sign. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't leave because the relationship was broken. She left because I was broken, and she didn't want to be associated with broken things. That realization stayed with me longer than the paperwork, longer than the loneliness. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, clean, and deeply personal. It was the kind that makes you question your judgment, your self-worth, and your understanding of love. I had believed that partnership meant endurance, that loyalty meant standing together when life turned cruel. She believed loyalty lasted only as long as comfort did. As the divorce became real, friends and relatives offered explanations on her behalf. People grieve differently. Not everyone can handle that kind of darkness. But those excuses only sharpened the wound. Because if love disappears the moment life becomes difficult, was it ever love at all? Being left during my weakest moment changed something inside me. It stripped away illusions and forced me to see people for who they truly were, not who I hoped they would be. I learned that some people don't abandon you because you fail. They abandon you because your pain reminds them of their own fears. And in that painful lesson, something quietly began to shift. Life has a strange way of hiding its sharpest turns behind moments of complete despair. While everyone around me believed my story had ended in loss and failure, something monumental was unfolding quietly in the background. At the time, I had no strength left to imagine a twist of fate. I was simply moving through days on autopilot, signing divorce papers, sorting through my mother's belongings, and trying to survive the emptiness she had left behind. Among her documents was a sealed envelope I had never seen before. It was tucked away with old letters and legal papers, something she must have planned long ago. I didn't open it immediately. Grief makes even simple actions feel heavy, and part of me feared whatever it contained would only deepen the ache. When I finally did open it, I expected a sentimental letter or instructions about family matters. What I found instead stopped me cold. My mother had been far more prepared and far more secretive than I ever knew. Over decades, she had quietly built and protected assets I had never been told about. Investments, properties, and holdings carefully structured under trusts and legal safeguards. The numbers felt unreal, like a mistake or a cruel joke played by fate. I reread the documents again and again, struggling to comprehend the scale of what was being placed in my hands. The full picture came together slowly through meetings with lawyers and financial advisors. Piece by piece, the truth emerged. I had inherited a fortune worth nearly $150 million. Not through luck or sudden gambling wins, but through years of discipline, foresight, and sacrifice. My mother's life work. The woman who had lived modestly, who never flaunted wealth, had been quietly securing a future she believed I would one day need. What struck me most wasn't the money itself, but the timing. The inheritance arrived when I had been completely written off by everyone else. To the outside world, I was a man abandoned by his wife, mourning his mother, and drifting without direction. No one saw what was happening behind closed doors. No one knew that everything they thought about my future was already outdated. I didn't feel joy right away. Instead, I felt a deep, overwhelming respect for my mother. Even in death, she was protecting me, guiding me, and proving that strength doesn't always announce itself loudly. She had known life could turn cruel without warning, and she had prepared for that reality in silence. I also realized something important in that moment. The people who had left did so believing I had nothing left to offer. No stability, no security, no promise of growth. They made their decisions based on what they could see, not on truth. The inheritance became more than money. It became a mirror reflecting how conditional their loyalty had been. I chose not to tell anyone, not my ex-wife, not distant relatives, not even close friends. This was not secrecy born of spite, but of clarity. For the first time, I understood the value of silence. Fate had handed me a second beginning, and I intended to step into it on my own terms, unseen and unannounced. After discovering the inheritance, I realized that my life had entered a new chapter, one that required careful navigation. The sudden shift from despair to unimaginable wealth was not something I wanted to flaunt. I didn't need validation or admiration from those who had abandoned me. What mattered was reclaiming my sense of self, building strength quietly, and preparing for a future that no longer depended on anyone else. The transformation had to begin from within, not from the outside. The first step was mental. Losing my mother and my wife had left deep emotional scars. I had to confront them honestly, not bury them beneath anger or distraction. Days were spent reflecting on what had happened, understanding my grief, and learning to accept that betrayal is a reflection of the betrayer, not the victim. I journaled, meditated, and studied philosophy and psychology to regain a sense of balance. Each session became a small victory, a way to reclaim my mind from the chaos of loss. Next, I focused on my financial awakening. The inheritance was enormous, but wealth without knowledge is fragile. I immersed myself in learning everything about investments, asset management, and philanthropy. I met with trusted financial advisors, but I never let them dictate my vision. I wanted control, and I needed to understand every aspect of the fortune I had inherited. This wasn't about indulgence or luxury. It was about mastering the tools that could sustain and grow my life independently. Physically, I began to take care of myself in ways I had neglected during grief. Long walks, exercise, and mindful eating became part of my routine. Rebuilding my body paralleled rebuilding my mind. Strength in one reflected strength in the other. I no longer wanted to feel weak or vulnerable. I wanted to feel capable, grounded, and in command of my own existence. Socially, I became selective. I didn't seek new relationships or rush into friendships. Instead, I observed, evaluated, and engaged with those who demonstrated integrity and consistency. I had learned that true loyalty shows in both abundance and scarcity, and I refused to waste energy on those who failed under pressure. The most profound change, however, was internal, a quiet confidence that came from knowing my worth, independent of validation. I had survived grief, betrayal, and despair, and now I had the tools, resources, and clarity to thrive. The inheritance became more than money. It was the foundation for a life designed by my own terms, one where my past losses no longer dictated my future. As weeks turned into months, people noticed the change in me. There was no dramatic announcement, no show of wealth. It was subtle, an aura of calm, focus, and self-possession. I walked taller, spoke with authority, and carried an inner strength that no one could see coming. This silent rise became my shield and my weapon. Those who had left me behind would soon realize that the man they underestimated was not only back, but far stronger than they had imagined. And all of this began quietly, in private, fueled by reflection, discipline, and the determination to transform tragedy into empowerment. Time has a way of revealing truths that people never expect to see. After rebuilding myself mentally, emotionally, and financially, the world began to notice the quiet transformation I had undergone. I didn't seek attention or validation, but fate has a way of making sure those who abandoned you witness your rise. The ex-wife who had left me during my darkest days was about to understand the magnitude of her mistake, though I never actively pursued revenge. Instead, I allowed the consequences of her choices to unfold naturally, a slow, burning realization that struck harder than any confrontation could. The first moment of reckoning came through subtle signals. Mutual friends who had once whispered about my failures began approaching me with respect and curiosity. Invitations, opportunities, and acknowledgments started pouring in, not because I demanded them, but because the reality of my new position in life was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just about wealth. It was about power, confidence, and the aura of someone who had endured loss and emerged stronger. My presence alone carried a message. Survival, growth, and transformation are often invisible until they are undeniable. Eventually, the ex-wife learned about my inheritance. The news arrived secondhand, carried with the kind of shock that comes when someone realizes they miscalculated a person's worth. She saw the life I had rebuilt, the independence I had achieved, and the circle of influence I now commanded. It was not just money that impressed her. It was the fact that I had turned heartbreak into empowerment, betrayal into self-reliance, and grief into wisdom. The woman who had walked away expecting me to crumble now faced the reality that her departure had done nothing but accelerate my rise. I never sought to humiliate or shame her. The justice lay not in confrontation, but in silent observation. She was forced to see that loyalty cannot be purchased or taken for granted, and that abandoning someone at their weakest moment is a decision with irreversible consequences. Every social gathering, every conversation, every mention of my achievements reminded her of the choice she had made and the lessons she had ignored. True value is revealed under pressure, and true strength emerges from adversity. In reflecting on this journey, I realized that life's most potent lessons often come wrapped in loss and betrayal. The ex-wife's regret was inevitable because she had underestimated the resilience of someone she once knew intimately. The sense of satisfaction I felt wasn't vindictive. It was affirming. It validated every effort I had made to rebuild, every moment I had spent in silence and discipline, and every decision to invest in my own growth rather than chasing revenge. Ultimately, the story became one of karma and timing, a testament to the power of resilience. The people who left, who doubted, or who betrayed did not need punishment. They simply needed to witness the consequences of their choices. The transformation I underwent spoke louder than any words, proving that personal justice is often best delivered through one's own strength, dignity, and success. Through this silent triumph, I discovered that the most powerful revenge is living well and thriving despite those who once abandoned you.